In the heart of Atlanta, Georgia, where the hum of jet engines at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport never ceased, I, Emily Carter, lived what I thought was a perfect life. My husband Michael Carter and I were both commercial pilots for Horizon Airways, a major U.S. airline that dominated the skies. Our marriage seemed as steady as a clear flight path for 7 years, and our shared passion for aviation has been binding us like the wings of a Boeing 737. We'd met at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, our dreams soaring higher than the planes we'd one day fly. I imagined us growing old together, sharing stories of turbulent flights and smooth landings over coffee in our cozy Buckhead apartment. But that dream crashed in my past life, shattered by a betrayal so cruel it grounded me forever, or so I thought. Michael was ambitious, his eyes always fixed on the next rung of the career ladder. I admired his drive, even supported it, sacrificing my aspirations to help him shine. But his ambition turned dark when he crossed paths with James Thornton, Horizon's powerful vice president of operations. James was a titan in the industry, his influence stretching from boardrooms to cockpits, and Michael saw him as the key to a senior captain's stripes. Michael did the unthinkable to win James's favor. He swapped my prescription eye drops with expired ones, a gift from James's daughter Abigail, who claimed they were an exclusive formula from a pharmaceutical insider. The expired drops, laced with a subtle toxin, slowly eroded my vision. Within months, I was blind, my pilot's license revoked, my career in ruins. Confined to a hospital bed in Emory University Hospital, I lay alone, the sterile beep of monitors my only company. Michael rarely visited, his excuses as thin as my hospital gown. "I'm swamped with training," he'd mutter before rushing off. I later learned from a colleague that he'd been promoted to senior captain thanks to Abigail's influence. She was James's daughter, a woman born into aviation royalty, and her family held stakes in multiple airlines. Their affair was no secret. Colleagues whispered about it in crew lounges, their pitying glances cutting deeper than the betrayal. Abigail visited me once, her diamond engagement ring, Michael's ring, glinting as she slapped me. "Couldn't keep your man," she sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. I had no tears left to cry. In my despair, I thought of my parents, both pilots who died in a Cessna crash when I was in college. Their loss had fueled my fear of flying, a nausea that gripped me every time I boarded a plane. Michael had been my anchor, then guiding me through countless simulator sessions until I conquered my fear. I'd given up a graduate school scholarship at MIT to support his career, spending 300 hours in simulators, coaching him, shielding him from workplace bullies at Horizon. I'd even passed up my dream of becoming an Air Force pilot, failing a test flight because I was nursing Michael through a fever. And yet he'd abandoned me for power and status. I couldn't bear the weight of it all in my past life. One night, as the hospital's silence suffocated me, I pulled out my IV and climbed to the roof. The Atlanta skyline glittered below, a cruel reminder of the skies I'd never fly again. As I stepped off the ledge, a warmth enveloped my chest, the protective talisman my mother had given me, a small silver pendant etched with a soaring eagle, a relic from her Air Force days. It glowed with an otherworldly light, and in that moment I heard her voice. "Fly again, Emily." The world faded, and I fell into darkness. When I opened my eyes, I was back in our apartment, the talisman pulsing against my skin. Sunlight streamed through the window, and Michael stood before me holding a bottle of eye drops, the same ones that had destroyed me. My heart raced as I realized what had happened. The talisman, a gift passed down from my parents, had somehow granted me a second chance, a rebirth, at the moment my fate turned. I wasn't just alive. I was whole, my vision clear, my pilot's license still valid. The talisman's glow was a promise, a call to rewrite my destiny. This time, I wouldn't let Michael's betrayal ground me. I'd soar higher than ever, reclaiming the skies that were rightfully mine. But I needed strength, courage, and a community to cheer me on. If my story moves you, hit that like button, drop a comment about your own comeback moments, and subscribe to follow my journey from the ashes to the clouds. Together, we'll rewrite the skies. The Atlanta morning was crisp, the scent of coffee mingling with the distant roar of planes taking off from Hartsfield-Jackson. I stood in our Buckhead apartment, the silver talisman warm against my chest, its faint glow a reminder of the second chance I'd been given. Oblivious to the storm brewing in my heart, Michael held out the bottle of eye drops that had blinded me in my past life. My pulse quickened, memories of hospital beds and betrayal flooding back. This was the turning point when my fate had once plummeted. Not this time. Instinctively, I slapped the bottle from his hand, the glass clinking as it hit the hardwood floor. "Use the ones in my bag," I demanded, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. Michael frowned, his dark eyes narrowing in confusion. What's wrong, Emily? These cost $3,000 top-of-the-line stuff. He bent to pick up the bottle, but I was faster snatching it and turning it to reveal the label. The expiration date glared back over a year past due. This is expired, Michael, I said, my fingers tightening around the bottle. Why would you give me this? His face stiffened, a flicker of guilt crossing his features before he masked it with a casual shrug. You didn't use them, so it's fine, he said, tossing the bottle into the trash with a forced laugh. I grabbed them for convenience. The airline's captain evaluation is killing me, Emily. Can you not make a big deal out of this? His dismissive tone was a knife to my heart, echoing the indifference of my past life when he'd left me to rot in that hospital. I studied him, the man I'd loved for 7 years, and saw only ambition, not care. The talisman pulsed, urging me to act. I took a deep breath, the weight of my past life's pain fueling my resolve. We need to talk, I said, pulling our marriage certificate from a drawer. Michael's eyes widened as I set it on the kitchen counter. We're not right for each other, Michael. I want a divorce. His smile froze, his hand pausing midair as if he couldn't process the words. You're throwing a tantrum again, he scoffed, his voice sharp with irritation. I'm swamped with flight training, Emily. I don't have time for games. I said this isn't a game, and my voice was calm but unyielding. You've been choosing James Thornton and his daughter over me. I'm done. His chest rose and fell, his jaw tight as he struggled to suppress his emotions. You're serious? He asked, his tone colder now. Anyone else would have left you by now with all your nagging. I met his gaze, unflinching. Then leave. The silence stretched heavy and suffocating until he finally spoke, his voice low. Fine. Let's get divorced. But you'll regret it. We drove to the Atlanta courthouse in silence, the hum of the car's engine the only sound. Michael's hands gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. He signed the divorce papers at the courthouse with such force that the pen nearly tore the page. The clerk explained the 30-day cooling-off period, a final hurdle before our marriage would end. As we left, I felt a strange lightness, the talisman's glow, a quiet affirmation of my choice. Michael, however, was already distracted, his phone buzzing with messages from Abigail. That night, he didn't come home. Instead, I saw a social media post on his account, a photo of him with Abigail, her arm draped over his shoulder, his pilot's uniform sleeve unmistakable. The caption read, "Celebrating New Horizons." Colleagues flooded the comments with congratulations, unaware of our divorce filing. By morning, the post was deleted, but the damage was done. Messages from coworkers piled up, asking if Michael and I had split. I replied, "We're done refusing to fuel the gossip." At Horizon Airways, the whispers grew louder, some pilots questioning whether a woman like me could handle the cockpit alone. I ignored them, focusing on the captain training program I'd enrolled in, determined to prove them wrong. The next day, I walked into the airline's training center, the talisman tucked under my uniform. The simulator room was a hive of activity, with pilots practicing emergency landings and turbulence scenarios. I spent hours running through engine failure protocols, my hands steady on the controls despite the lingering nausea from my parents' crash. Captain Daniel Thornton, James's son, and Abigail's older brother, observed quietly. Daniel was a respected pilot, unlike his sister, and his calm demeanor intrinsically contrasted with Abigail's entitlement. "You're sharp, Emily," he said after a session. "Don't let the noise get to you." His words were a lifeline, a reminder that not everyone saw me as just a female pilot. But Abigail was relentless. On a training flight, she commandeered the radio, flirting with Michael while I monitored the instruments. Her voice grated, a deliberate attempt to unsettle me. She teased me. 7 years married, no kids, knowing I could hear. Michael glanced at me, then responded, "Career comes first." I kept my focus, refusing to let her bait me. The talisman's warmth steadied my nerves, a silent promise that I was on the right path. This was my second chance, and I wouldn't let Abigail or Michael take it from me. The Atlanta skyline glittered under a moonlit night, but inside our Buckhead apartment, the air was heavy with the aftermath of my decision to divorce Michael. The silver talisman, my mother's Air Force relic, rested against my chest, its faint warmth a reminder of the second chance I'd been granted to rewrite my fate. The divorce papers were filed, the 30-day cooling-off period ticking like a countdown to freedom, but the whispers at Horizon Airways grew louder. Colleagues at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport buzzed with gossip about Michael's social media post, a photo of him with Abigail Thornton, her arm draped possessively over his shoulder, posted the night after we filed. The comments from coworkers assuming we were still a happy couple stung like turbulence on a clear day. I responded to their messages with a curt, "We're done refusing to fuel the rumor mill." The next morning, my birthday, I woke to an empty apartment. Michael hadn't come home, and his absence silently confirmed his new priorities. I checked my phone, expecting a message from him. After all, for 7 years, he'd always made breakfast on my birthday, a tradition from our college days at Embry-Riddle. Instead, I found nothing but notifications from colleagues, their pity thinly veiled as concern. I tossed my phone aside and headed to a pawn shop in Midtown where I sold my wedding ring for $1,300. The weight of the ring, worn through 3 seasons of love and sacrifice, felt like a chain I'd finally broken. With the money, I bought a Model F-16 fighter jet, a nod to my childhood dream of becoming an Air Force pilot, a dream I'd abandoned when I nursed Michael through an illness, missing my test flight. The talisman pulsed as I held the model, urging me to reclaim the skies I'd once surrendered. At Horizon, the challenges of being a female pilot in a male-dominated industry hit harder. In the crew lounge, older pilots muttered about women in the cockpit, their skepticism a constant headwind. "She's good, but can she handle a real emergency?" one captain whispered loud enough for me to hear. I ignored them, focusing on the captain training program I'd enrolled in. Nights in the simulator became my sanctuary, where I practiced engine-out procedures and crosswind landings until my hands moved with muscle memory. Daniel Thornton, Abigail's older brother and a respected captain, noticed my dedication. Unlike his sister, who coasted on her father James's influence, Daniel had earned his stripes through skill and grit. He said, "You're sharper than most," after a session, his blue eyes steady. "Don't let the old guard rattle you. They're just scared of change." But Abigail was a storm of her own. She'd secured a flight attendant position through nepotism, her family's name opening doors her skills couldn't. On a training flight to Chicago, she strutted into the crew briefing, her designer heels clicking, and flirted with Michael over the radio. 7 years and no kids, Michael, she teased, her voice crackling through my headset. Is Emily too focused on her career? Michael glanced at me, his jaw tight, before responding. It's not the right time. I kept my eyes on the instrument panel, refusing to let her bait me. The talisman's warmth steadied my nerves, a silent anchor as I navigated the flight's literal and figurative turbulence. Back in Atlanta, I visited my parents' graves in a quiet cemetery outside the city. The anniversary of their plane crash loomed, and the nausea that had haunted me since their death crept up, a reminder of the fear I'd overcome to become a pilot. Michael had been my rock then, holding my hand through simulator sessions until I could fly without vomiting. I found a bouquet of white daisies on their graves, Abigail's doing, I later learned, oblivious to their pollen allergies. I replaced them with pastries, my parents' favorite, and sat by the headstones, eating slowly. The talisman glowed faintly, and I whispered, "I'm flying for you." The act was a small rebellion, a step toward healing the wounds of my past life, where I'd let Michael's betrayal define me. At home, I found Abigail helping a drunken Michael onto the couch, the apartment's passcode betrayed to her. She wore a $50,000 necklace, her privilege on display, and sneered at me. "You're playing, Emily? No wonder he's moved on." Her words echoed the taunts I'd faced as a female pilot, but I'd heard worse. Once Michael would have defended me, boasting about my Embry-Riddle grades and my knack for nailing crosswind landings. Now he lay lifeless, mumbling apologies as Abigail left. I didn't help him to bed. I left him there, a cold reminder of his choices. The talisman pulsed, urging me forward. I wasn't just fighting for my career, I was fighting for myself against a world that doubted me, and a husband who discarded me. The Atlanta summer was relentless, the heat shimmering off the tarmac at Hartsfield-Jackson as I prepared for Horizon Airways flight safety competition, a chance to prove my worth in the captain training program. The talisman tucked beneath my pilot's uniform pulsed faintly, a reminder of my second chance to rewrite my destiny. The competition was high stakes. Pilots drew random topics, prepared for an hour, and presented to a panel of senior captains. A strong performance could fast-track my promotion, but the whispers in the crew lounge reminded me of the odds stacked against me. "Female pilots don't last," a veteran muttered, his voice carrying over the clink of coffee cups. I ignored him, focusing on the simulator sessions I'd logged, mastering everything from engine failures to thunderstorm reroutes. I drew a tricky topic, passenger reassurance during emergencies. It required finesse, blending technical knowledge with calm authority skills I'd honed but rarely showcased. I spent the hour crafting a speech, weaving real-world examples from my 7 years of flying. Michael, also a competitor, drew an easier topic: emergency landings, his strongest suit. From the corner of my eye, I saw Abigail Thornton, her designer scarf contrasting with the crew's uniforms, whispering encouragements to him. Her presence was a distraction, her father James's influence looming over the event like a storm cloud. I left my notes on a backstage table as I entered the restroom, trusting the crew's professionalism. That was my mistake. When I returned, my speech was shredded, scattered like confetti across the floor. Abigail's smug glance from the audience confirmed her sabotage. My heart sank, but the talisman's warmth steadied me. I took a deep breath, straightened my uniform, and stepped onto the stage. Improvising, I recalled how I'd calmed a panicked cabin during a hydraulic failure 2 years ago. My delivery faltered, names and details slipped, but I pressed on my voice steady despite the judges' skeptical glances. The scores came in. Michael topped the board while I barely cracked the top 10. The sting of failure was sharp, but I refused to let it ground me. Backstage, I found security footage sent by a sympathetic colleague on my phone. It showed Abigail sneaking to the table, tearing my notes with a smirk. I confronted Michael in the crew lounge, showing him the video. His face paled, but instead of outrage, he deleted the footage. He said, "Abigail's the daughter of an executive," his voice low. "This competition doesn't matter, Emily. If she finds out you kept this, she could tank your career. Let it go." His words were a betrayal as sharp as the expired eye drops. In my past life, he'd dismissed my blindness with the same indifference, prioritizing Abigail's connections over my pain. The talisman pulsed, urging me to fight back. I reported the sabotage to Horizon's ethics board, and am attaching a backup of the saved footage. The board promised an investigation, but Abigail's family influence cast a long shadow. Daniel Thornton, her brother, and a captain approached me later. "I saw what she did," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I've talked to the board. They'll handle it quietly, but you need to keep pushing. You're better than this." Daniel's support was unexpected. He'd always been reserved, his reputation built on skill, not his father's name. Unlike Abigail, who flaunted her privilege, Daniel had faced his own battles, overcoming skepticism about his family ties to earn respect. "Why help me?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Because you're the real deal, Emily, and I hate nepotism as much as you do." The fallout was subtle but real. Abigail was reprimanded, though her father's influence softened the consequences. Meanwhile, I doubled down on my training, spending nights in the simulator practicing scenarios like bird strikes and cabin depressurization. The old guard's doubts, whispers that women couldn't handle high-stakes flights, fueled my resolve. I wasn't just fighting for a promotion, but proving I belonged in the cockpit, talisman or no talisman. On a long-haul flight to Seattle, Abigail, on duty as a flight attendant, tried to rattle me again, flirting with Michael over the radio. "No kids after 7 years," she taunted. Trouble in paradise. I ignored her, focusing on the weather radar as a storm loomed. Michael, to his credit, shut her down. "Not now, Abigail," he said, glancing at me. But his loyalty was fleeting, his ambition tied to her influence. Back in Atlanta, I began to see Abigail differently. Her taunts were sharp, but her eyes betrayed a restlessness, a hint of the passion she'd buried under her family's expectations. I'd learned from colleagues that she'd once raced cars competing in amateur circuits before her parents forced her into aviation. The talisman's glow seemed to whisper she was trapped just as I'd once been by Michael's betrayal. I wasn't ready to forgive her, but I understood her, a spark of empathy that would later change everything. The Atlanta dusk painted the sky in hues of amber, and the distant hum of planes at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport was a constant reminder of the life I was fighting to reclaim. The silver talisman, my mother's Air Force relic, pulsed gently against my chest, warmth a beacon of my second chance. The divorce papers were filed, the 30-day cooling-off period ticking down, but the weight of my past life lingered. Michael's betrayal, swapping my eye drops with expired ones to curry favor with James Thornton, Horizon Airways vice president, had once cost me my vision and career. Now reborn, I was determined to rise above it, but the scars of 7 years of sacrifice demanded reckoning. At Horizon, the captain training program became my proving ground. I spent late nights in the simulator, tackling scenarios like sudden depressurization and engine fires, my hands steady despite the whispers of doubt from veteran pilots. "Women don't belong in the cockpit," one grumbled during a coffee break, his words echoing the sexism I'd faced since Embry-Riddle. I ignored them, focusing on precision landings and emergency protocols, each successful run a step toward my captain's stripes. Daniel Thornton, James's son, and Abigail's brother, offered quiet encouragement. You've got the instincts, he said after a grueling session, his calm demeanor a contrast to his sister's entitlement. Keep at it, Emily. You're rewriting the rule book. But Abigail was relentless. She was on duty as a flight attendant on a training flight to Dallas, and her presence was a calculated disruption. She taunted over the radio, "No kids after 7 years, Emily too busy playing pilot." Her words stung a reminder of the life Michael and I had planned but never lived. He glanced at me, his expression unreadable, before muttering, "Not now, Abigail." I focused on the flight path, the talisman's warmth grounding me. But her taunts unearthed memories of my past life, how I'd given up a graduate scholarship at MIT to support Michael's career, coaching him through 300 hours of simulator training, shielding him from workplace bullies. I'd even sacrificed my Air Force dream, missing a test flight to nurse him through a fever, only for him to betray me for Abigail's influence. The anniversary of my parents' plane crash loomed, and I drove to their graves in a quiet Georgia cemetery, the talisman pulsing as I approached. Their Cessna crash had left me with a crippling fear of flying, a nausea that gripped me every time I boarded a plane. Michael had been my anchor, then holding my hand through simulator sessions until I could fly without vomiting. I found a bouquet of white daisies on their graves, Abigail's doing oblivious to their pollen allergies. I replaced them with pastries, their favorite, and sat by the headstones, eating slowly. "I'm flying for you," I whispered, the talisman glowing faintly. The act was a quiet rebellion, a step toward healing the wounds of my past life, where I'd let Michael's betrayal define me. Back home, Abigail's intrusion escalated. She arrived with a drunken Michael using the apartment's passcode he'd given her. Her $50,000 necklace gleamed as she sneered, "You're plain Emily. No wonder he's moved on." Her words echoed the taunts I'd faced as a female pilot, but I'd heard worse. Once Michael would have defended me, boasting about my Embry-Riddle grades and my knack for crosswind landings. Now he mumbled apologies and passed out on the couch. I left him there, the talisman urging me to let go. But a flicker of Abigail's restlessness caught my eye. Her eyes betrayed a yearning, a hint of the racing passion she'd buried under her parents' expectations. I wasn't ready to forgive, but saw her trap mirroring my past entanglement with Michael. At Horizon, the sexism intensified. During a crew briefing, a senior captain questioned my simulator scores, implying that male instructors had carried me. I presented my logged hours, hundreds more than required, but he dismissed them, citing soft skills as my weakness. Daniel intervened, his voice firm. "Her scores speak for themselves. Back off." His support was a lifeline rooted in his own battles against nepotism. He'd confided once that he'd nearly quit aviation, tired of being seen as James Thornton's son. "I stayed because I love flying," he said. "Same as you." His words fueled my resolve, but Abigail's next move would test it further, threatening to ground me before I could soar. The Atlanta summer sun beat down on Hartsfield-Jackson's tarmac, the heat mirroring the pressure of Horizon Airways flight safety competition, a critical step in my captain training program. The silver talisman tucked under my uniform pulsed faintly, a reminder of my second chance to rewrite my destiny. The competition was a high-stakes showcase. Pilots drew random topics, prepared for an hour, and presented to a panel of senior captains. A strong performance could secure my promotion, but the old guard's skepticism loomed. "Female pilots crack under pressure," a veteran muttered in the crew lounge, his words a gust of headwind. I pushed past my simulator hours, hundreds of emergency scenarios, mastered my shield against their doubts. I drew a daunting topic: passenger reassurance during emergencies. It demanded a blend of technical expertise and calm authority skills I'd honed but rarely displayed. I spent the hour crafting a speech, weaving in a real incident where I'd calmed a cabin during a hydraulic failure. Michael also competed and drew an easier topic: emergency landings, his forte. Abigail Thornton, her designer scarf contrasting with the crew's uniforms, hovered near him, whispering encouragements. Her father James's influence overshadowed the event, and her smug glances at me were a silent challenge. Leaving my notes backstage to grab water was my mistake. When I returned, they were shredded, scattered like debris after a crash. Abigail's smirk from the audience confirmed her sabotage. My heart raced, but the talisman's warmth steadied me. I stepped onto the stage, improvising from memory. I described reassuring passengers mid-crisis, my voice steady despite faltering details. The judge's skeptical expression stung, and my scores barely cracked the top 10. Michael predictably topped the board, his polished delivery earning applause. The failure burned, but I refused to let it ground me. Backstage, a colleague sent me security footage showing Abigail tearing my notes. I confronted Michael in the lounge, showing him the video. His face paled, but he deleted it. Abigail's dad runs half the airline, he said, his voice low. This doesn't matter, Emily. If she sees this, your career's toast. Drop it. His words echoed my past life, where he'd dismissed my blindness to protect Abigail's influence. The talisman pulsed, urging defiance. I sent a backup of the footage to Horizon's ethics board, demanding accountability. The board promised a review, but James Thornton's clout made justice uncertain. Daniel Thornton, Abigail's brother, approached me later. I saw what she did, he said, his blue eyes steady. I pushed the board to act. You deserve better. Unlike Abigail, Daniel had fought for his reputation, overcoming whispers that his promotions were handouts. I almost left aviation, he admitted. Dad's shadow was suffocating, but flying's my life. You get that. His support was a lifeline, deepening our bond. I asked why he cared. You're the best pilot I know, he said, and I'm done with family games. The fallout was quiet but real. Abigail received a slap on the wrist reprimand, her father's influence shielding her. I doubled down on training, logging extra simulator hours, mastering bird strikes and thunderstorm reroutes. The sexism persisted. A senior captain questioned my emergency skills, implying I relied on charm. I presented my simulator logs, but he waved them off. Daniel backed me, presenting his own data to expose the bias. She's outflying half the roster, he said. The captain backed down, but the tension lingered. On a long-haul flight to Los Angeles, Abigail on duty tried to rattle me again, flirting with Michael over the radio. Trouble balancing work and family, Emily, she taunted. I ignored her, focusing on a brewing storm on the weather radar. Michael shut her down. Enough Abigail, but his loyalty was thin, tied to her father's power. I noticed a flicker in Abigail's eyes, a restlessness hinting at her buried passion for racing. She was trapped just as I'd been by Michael's ambition. The talisman glowed, whispering empathy, but her next move would push me to the edge, testing my resilience in the skies and beyond. The Atlanta summer air was thick with humidity, mirroring the tension that clung to me as I navigated the fallout of my divorce filing at Horizon Airways. The silver talisman, my mother's Air Force relic, pulsed faintly against my chest, its warmth a steady reminder of my second chance to rewrite my destiny. With only 2 weeks left in the 30-day cooling-off period, I threw myself into the captain training program, determined to rise above the betrayal that had grounded me in my past life. Michael's decision to swap my eye drops with expired ones, a ploy to win favor with James Thornton, Horizon's vice president, had once cost me my vision and career. Now reborn, I was fighting to reclaim the skies, but the scars of his indifference ran deep. At Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, the whispers of sexism persisted. During a simulator session, a senior instructor scrutinized my every move, muttering, "Women pilots need to prove they're not just diversity hires." I aced a twin-engine failure scenario, my hands steady on the controls, but his grudging nod was the only acknowledgement. Daniel Thornton, Abigail's brother, and a respected captain watched from the sidelines. "You're outflying half the roster," he said, his voice firm. "Don't let them dim your light." Daniel's support was a lifeline. He'd confided that he'd nearly quit aviation, tired of being overshadowed by his father's name. His own battles against nepotism made him an ally I hadn't expected. Michael, meanwhile, was unraveling. On the day of his first supervising pilot flight, a critical step toward his captain's promotion, he stood at the gate fumbling through his bag. His pilot's license was missing a grave error in an industry where credentials were sacred. The captain, a no-nonsense veteran, gave him 1 hour to find it or face indefinite grounding. Michael's forehead glistened with sweat, his voice trembling. "I swear it was in my bag," he muttered, panic creeping in. He turned to me, eyes wild, and accused, "Did you take it, Emily?" The absurdity stung, but the talisman's warmth kept me calm. "Check Abigail's bag," I said coolly, recalling her habit of borrowing his things. His temper snapped. "You're sabotaging me," he shouted, grabbing my bag and rummaging through it. He froze, pulling out a severed blue lanyard strap that had once held his license. In my past life, I'd repaired his broken lanyard with a nylon zip tie, reassuring him after nightmares about losing his credentials. Now he'd forgotten that care blinded by ambition. In a rage, he slapped me across the face, the first time he'd ever struck me in 7 years. The sting was sharp, but the shock of his violence in front of the crew was sharper. Abigail smirked from the sidelines, her designer purse dangling as if watching a show. Daniel stepped in, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Enough, Michael. You're done here." He escorted me away as the crew restrained Michael. The captain grounded him pending investigation, and the missing license was a serious breach. Whispers spread through Horizon's crew lounges, Michael's affair with Abigail, his outburst, his lost permit. His reputation, once polished by my support, began to crack. I filed a report with the ethics board detailing the incident, but James Thornton's influence loomed threatening to soften the consequences. That night, I visited Michael's parents in their modest Decatur home, the talisman glowing as I drove. They'd been my rock after my parents' crash, treating me like a daughter despite Michael's distance from them. His father, a retired captain with a storied career, had pressured Michael into aviation, a path he'd never truly wanted. Over dinner, I broke the news of our divorce. His mother's eyes welled up. "Tell us what he did, Emily. We'll fix this." I shook my head, calm but firm. "We're not right for each other anymore." His father sighed, placing a hand on his wife's. "Your family, Emily, if you leave our doors always open." Their warmth was a balm, but I spoke up for Michael despite everything. "Don't pressure him to be you, Uncle. He's struggling." His father nodded, a weightlifter, but the talisman urged me to move on. Back at the apartment, I found a Polaroid in Michael's bag, Abigail hanging onto his shoulder, flashing a victory sign. He stammered. It was just a photo of Emily. We grabbed dinner. I tossed it into the trash, the talisman pulsing. Abigail's smirk at the airport replayed in my mind, but so did her restless eyes, hinting at a dream she'd buried, racing a passion her parents had crushed. The talisman whispered empathy, but Michael's violence had drawn a line. As I packed my things, preparing for a new apartment near the airport, I knew the skies were calling, and no one, not Michael, not Abigail, would ground me again. The Atlanta skyline glowed under a late summer moon, but the tension at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport was electric as the divorce cooling-off period neared its end. The silver talisman, my mother's Air Force relic, pulsed against my chest, its warmth a steady anchor in my fight to rewrite my destiny. Michael's slap at the gate, his first act of violence in our 7-year marriage, had shattered any lingering hope of reconciliation. Grounded for losing his pilot's license, he was spiraling his ambition to impress James Thornton, Horizon Airways vice president, crumbling under the weight of his mistakes. I, Emily Carter, was doubling down on the captain training program, determined to soar where he'd fallen. At Horizon, the sexism I faced as a female pilot intensified. A senior instructor questioned my handling of a bird strike scenario during a simulator review, despite my perfect execution. He said that women need to be twice as good to belong here, his tone dismissive. I presented my logged hours, hundreds of flawless runs, but he shrugged, citing instinct as my shortfall. Daniel Thornton, Abigail's brother and a captain, intervened. "Her record's better than yours was at her stage," he told the instructor, his voice calm but unyielding. Daniel's support was rooted in his own struggles. He'd once nearly quit, tired of proving he wasn't just James Thornton's son. "I stay for the skies," he'd told me. "You do too, Emily." Abigail, however, was a storm bent on chaos. Her father's influence had secured her a flight attendant role, but her lack of skill was glaring. On a training flight to Miami, she strutted into the cockpit off-limits to attendants, her designer heels clicking. Before I could order her out, she snatched my pilot's license from the console and ripped it in half, the plastic snapping like a broken promise. "This is karma," she sneered, her eyes glinting with malice. "Let's see how you pass your evaluation now. How many airlines hire women pilots? I can count them on one hand." Her words echoed the industry's bias, a knife twisted in an old wound. I stood frozen, the talisman pulsing, urging me to stay calm. Daniel, co-captain, stepped forward, his arm a barrier between us. "Get out, Abigail," he said, his voice low but firm. "The cockpit's no place for your games." He pointed to the security camera, its red light blinking. "It's all recorded." Abigail's face burned with humiliation, but she stormed out, tossing her hair. Daniel turned to me. "We'll reissue your license in 10 minutes. This isn't on you." His calm authority was a lifeline, but I saw the strain in his eyes, his sister's behavior a constant embarrassment. "She's always been like this," he admitted later. "Racing was her thing, but Dad forced her into aviation. She's lashing out." The airline reissued my license, but the incident shook me. The ethics board, wary of James Thornton's clout, suggested I take a flight break to avoid further conflict. I agreed, needing space from Abigail's venom, but I used the time to sharpen my skills. I logged extra simulator hours, practicing thunderstorm diversions and engine-out landings, each in defiance of the voices that doubted me. Daniel joined me for late-night sessions, sharing stories of his battles, how he'd faced scrutiny for his last name and earned respect through skill. "You're not just a pilot, Emily," he said. "You're a trailblazer." Abigail's escalation didn't stop. At a crew briefing, she spread rumors that I'd lost it after the divorce, undermining my credibility. A colleague sympathetic to my side told me about her past. Abigail had raced cars in amateur circuits, winning trophies before her parents forced her into a respectable career. Her bitterness was a mask for a dream she'd abandoned. The talisman glowed, whispering empathy, but her actions demanded justice. I filed another ethics report detailing her cockpit intrusion, and Daniel backed me, submitting camera footage. The board issued a formal warning, but James's influence ensured it was light. Personally, I revisited Michael's parents, bringing pastries to their Decatur home. They'd heard about the slap, their faces heavy with shame. "He's lost himself," his father said, his voice heavy. "Aviation was my dream, not his. I pushed too hard." I nodded, the talisman urging honesty. "Let him find his path," I said, "and let me find mine." As I left, his mother pressed a photo into my hand, Michael and me at Embry-Riddle laughing in a simulator. I tucked it away, a reminder of a love that no longer existed. Abigail's next move would push me to the edge, but the skies were calling and I was ready to answer. The Atlanta skyline shimmered under a September dawn, the hum of Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport a constant pulse as I neared the end of the 30-day divorce cooling-off period. The silver talisman, my mother's Air Force relic, pulsed faintly against my chest, its warmth a steady reminder of my second chance to rewrite my destiny. Michael's betrayal, swapping my eye drops with expired ones to curry favor with James Thornton, Horizon Airways vice president, had once cost me my vision and career. His recent violence, slapping me at the gate over a missing pilot's license, had shattered any lingering ties. Now reborn, I was ready to sever our bond and soar free, but the skies were turbulent with workplace challenges and Abigail Thornton's relentless antagonism. At Horizon, I threw myself into the captain training program, my nights spent in simulators mastering complex scenarios like mid-flight engine failures and severe turbulence reroutes. The sexism I faced as a female pilot was unrelenting. A senior captain scoffed during a debrief, "Women don't have the nerve for command." I countered with my simulator logs, hundreds of hours flawless executions, but his dismissive smirk lingered. Daniel Thornton, Abigail's brother and a respected captain, backed me up. He said, "Emily's outperforming most of you," his voice cutting through the room. Daniel's battles against his father's shadow made him a kindred spirit. He'd confided about nearly quitting aviation, tired of proving his worth beyond his last name. "You're a force, Emily," he told me. "Keep flying." The day of the divorce finalization arrived, a crisp morning that felt like a new beginning. I drove to the Atlanta courthouse, the talisman glowing faintly as I parked. Michael was already there, his face a mix of confusion and defiance. 7 years, Emily," he said, his voice strained. "You're throwing it all away over one mistake." I handed him the divorce certificate, my voice calm. 30 days, Michael. You chose Abigail and her father's influence. I choose myself." He hesitated, his pen hovering over the final papers as if hoping I'd relent. I didn't. He signed, his hand trembling, and the clerk stamped the documents. Our marriage, along with 7 years of shared dreams, was over. As we stepped outside, Abigail waited, dressed in a designer coat, her smile triumphant. She wrapped her arm around Michael's, laughing. "Finally free, huh?" she said, her eyes locked on me. I suspected her father's influence had smoothed the divorce process, a final jab at my expense. I said, "Your future's here," Michael said, slipping the green certificate into my bag and turning away. The talisman's glow faded, its purpose fulfilled. I was no longer bound to my past life's pain. I drove to my new apartment near the airport, a small but bright space furnished with the F-16 model I'd bought, a symbol of the Air Force dream I'd reclaim in spirit. That night, Michael called, his voice thick with alcohol. "Emily, I messed up," he slurred. "Abigail gave me those eye drops. She said they were exclusive from her cousin's pharma company. I didn't check the date." He paused as if expecting forgiveness. "And my license, she took it as a keepsake. It fell into her bag. I didn't know." I stayed silent, the talisman still against my chest. He rambled about a social media post Abigail's doing, not his. He claimed and begged me to reconsider. "We didn't have to fight like this," he said. I hung up unmoved. His apologies were too late, and his loyalty to Abigail's influence was a choice he'd made long ago. At Horizon, the fallout from Abigail's actions continued. Her cockpit intrusion, where she'd ripped my pilot's license in half, had sparked an ethics board review, but her father's clout ensured only a warning. Still, Daniel's support kept me grounded. He joined me for simulator sessions, offering tips on handling biased evaluators. They'll test you harder because you're a woman, he said. Beat them at their own game. His struggles, proving his skill beyond his family's name, mirrored mine, forging a quiet bond. I noticed Abigail's restlessness growing. During a crew briefing, her eyes darted to a racing magazine, hinting at the passion she'd buried under her parents' expectations. The talisman whispered empathy, but her actions demanded vigilance. I visited Michael's parents one last time, bringing pastries to their Decatur home. They'd heard about the divorce and Michael's outburst, their faces heavy with guilt. He's lost his way, his father said, a retired captain whose pressure had pushed Michael into aviation. I wanted him to be me, not himself. I nodded, the talisman urging honesty. Let him find his path, I said. I'm finding mine. His mother hugged me, tears in her eyes. You're always welcome here, Emily. As I left, I felt a weight lift my heart lighter than it had been in years. The skies awaited, and no one, not Michael, not Abigail, would hold me back. The Atlanta autumn was crisp, and the skies above Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport were a canvas of endless possibility as I stepped into my first supervising pilot flight. The silver talisman, my mother's Air Force relic, pulsed faintly against my chest, its warmth a beacon of my second chance. With the divorce finalized, I was free from Michael's betrayal. His swapping of my eye drops with expired ones to impress James Thornton, Horizon Airways vice president, a wound now healed by my resolve. The captain training program was my proving ground, and I'd logged countless simulator hours, mastering everything from engine failures to thunderstorm diversions. But the industry's sexism loomed a constant headwind as I fought for my captain's stripes. The long-haul flight to San Francisco was my chance to shine. Daniel Thornton, Abigail's brother and co-captain, greeted me in the cockpit with a nod. He said, "Fly like you always do, Emily," his blue eyes steady. Daniel's support had been unwavering. He'd shared how he'd nearly left aviation tired of proving himself beyond his father's shadow. "You're rewriting history," he added, a quiet nod to my fight against the old guard's bias. As we prepared for takeoff, Abigail, on duty as a flight attendant, lingered near the cockpit door, her presence a calculated distraction. I ignored her, focusing on the pre-flight checklist, the talisman grounding my nerves. A thunderstorm rolled in mid-flight, and the weather radar flashed red with severe turbulence. Passengers screamed in the cabin, their panic audible through the bulkhead. Abigail, pale and trembling, stormed into the cockpit against protocol, her voice shrill. "This is your fault, Emily. I've never had a flight this bad." Daniel silenced her. "Get back to the cabin, Abigail. Now!" She glared at me, but his authority sent her retreating. The talisman pulsed, and I suppressed the nausea tied to my parents' plane crash, a fear I'd conquered years ago. I analyzed the storm's range, coordinating with air traffic control. ATC suggested turning back, but I saw a clear path. "We're rerouting," I announced, my voice calm as I mapped an alternate route. Daniel double-checked the systems, his hand steady on the co-pilot controls. "You've got this," he said, his confidence a lifeline. I reassured the crew and passengers over the intercom, my tone steady despite the turbulence. "We're navigating around the storm. Stay seated and we'll land safely." The nausea crept up, but Daniel's quiet presence anchored me. The turbulence eased and the flight stabilized, landing smoothly in San Francisco. Passengers applauded and Daniel grinned. He said, "We'd be in the black box, half joking if not for you." He filled out the evaluation board, his notes glowing with praise. Abigail, humiliated, avoided my gaze as we deplaned. Back in Atlanta, the captain's assessment loomed. The old guard's bias persisted. A senior evaluator questioned my emotional stability as a female pilot, citing Abigail's rumors. I presented my flight logs and Daniel's evaluation, and my performance was undeniable. The talisman glowed as I aced the assessment, earning my captain's certification, one of the few women to do so at Horizon. Holding the certificate, tears welled up, not from pain but triumph. In my past life, blindness had stolen this moment. Now I'd reclaimed it. The talisman's warmth faded, its purpose complete, but its strength lingered in me. Michael, meanwhile, was faltering. His emotional instability, exacerbated by his slap and lost license, tanked his assessments. Even Abigail's influence couldn't save him. James Thornton's clout only went so far. Colleagues whispered about his affair, his career unraveling like a poorly planned flight. I heard from Daniel that Abigail's restlessness was growing. She'd been seen watching racing videos in the crew lounge, her eyes alight with a passion her airline role couldn't fulfill. The talisman had taught me to see her trap her parents' expectations, mirroring Michael's father's pressure on him. I wasn't ready to forgive, but I understood her, a spark of empathy igniting. Daniel stood by my side at the promotion ceremony, his pride evident. "You're a captain now," he said. "The sky's yours." I smiled, the weight of my past life lifting. Michael appeared, holding a box of old love letters from our Embry-Riddle days. "Take these," he pleaded. "I still think of you." I laughed coldly. "You dug these out of a closet, didn't you?" "It's too late, Michael." Abigail nearby linked her arm with his, sneering. "Move on, Emily. You're alone now." Daniel stepped forward, his hand on my shoulder. "She's not alone. Let's go, Captain." I knew the skies were mine as we walked away, and no one could take them from me. The Atlanta autumn leaves fell like embers, mirroring the collapse of Michael's world as I stood at the peak of mine. The silver talisman, my mother's Air Force relic, no longer pulsed against my chest. Its glow had faded after my captain's certification, its purpose fulfilled in granting me a second chance to rewrite my destiny. Now a captain at Horizon Airways, I'd overcome Michael's betrayal, his swapping of my eye drops with expired ones, to curry favor with James Thornton, the airline's vice president. His violence slapping me over a lost license and Abigail Thornton's sabotage had tested me, but I'd soared above them. The skies were mine, but the past lingered, demanding closure. Michael's career unraveled like a poorly charted flight. His emotional instability, fueled by his affair with Abigail, and his outburst at the gate led to failed assessments. Even James Thornton's influence couldn't salvage his promotion. Horizon's evaluators cited unprofessional conduct. Colleagues whispered about his downfall, his once promising trajectory grounded. I heard from a coworker that Michael had married Abigail in a lavish ceremony, but the marriage crumbled within months. During a public argument, he struck her a scandal that echoed his slap against me. Abigail, leveraging her father's clout, ensured his immediate suspension. No airline would touch him now. His career was over. Michael's parents called their voices heavy with worry. "He's falling apart, Emily," his mother said. "Drinking, shutting himself in. Can you talk to him?" I declined, the memory of his betrayal too raw. Michael himself called drunk, begging to meet. "I messed up," he slurred. "I never meant to hurt you." I hung up the talisman's absence, a reminder that I owed him nothing. His father, a retired captain, had pressured him into aviation, a path he'd never wanted. Now, jobless Michael had no fallback, his identity tied to a career he'd pursued for others. I felt a pang of pity, but my focus was forward. At Horizon, I faced lingering sexism as a female captain. During a flight briefing, a veteran pilot questioned my authority, suggesting a male co-pilot double-check my decisions. I presented my flawless flight record, but his smirk persisted. Daniel Thornton, my steadfast ally, intervened. "Captain Carter's record speaks louder than your bias," he said, his voice cutting through the room. Daniel's struggles, proving his worth beyond his father's name, had forged a bond between us. He'd shared how he'd nearly quit, tired of nepotism's shadow. "You're changing the game, Emily," he told me. "Don't stop." Abigail's path took an unexpected turn. Her suspension for ripping my pilot's license had been light thanks to her father, but her restlessness was palpable. I'd learned from Daniel that she'd once been a rising star in amateur car racing, winning trophies before her parents forced her into aviation. Her bitterness, her taunts, her sabotage stemmed from a dream she'd buried. The talisman's lessons lingered, urging empathy despite her actions. I approached her in the crew lounge where she sat flipping through a racing magazine, her eyes alight with longing. I said, "You're not trapped," Abigail handing her a card for a motorsport contact, a friend from Embry-Riddle. "You can still race." She scoffed, her defenses up. "What here to gloat? You've got everything, Captain Stripe's perfect record." Her voice cracked, betraying vulnerability. "My parents always compared me to you. Even Daniel thinks you're better. I hated you for it." I nodded, unfazed. "You don't have to be them. Race, it's what you love." She stared at the card, her fingers trembling. "Why help me?" she asked. "Because I know what it's like to lose yourself." I said, the talisman's wisdom guiding me. She took the card, a flicker of hope in her eyes, and later contacted my friend, taking her first steps back to racing. At Horizon, I navigated long-haul flights, alternating shifts with Daniel. During a flight to London, he shared more about his past. "Abigail was fearless on the track," he said. "Dad crushed that spark, made her a pawn in his empire. I stayed in aviation to spite him, to prove I could do it my way." His honesty deepened our bond, a quiet understanding between pilots who'd fought similar battles. I faced no more sabotage from Abigail. Her focus had shifted, her energy channeled into racing tryouts. The industry's sexism persisted, but my captain's stripes silenced most doubters. Each flight was a triumph, a defiance of my past life's blindness and despair. As I walked through Hartsfield-Jackson, my uniform adorned with captain's bars, I felt the weight of my journey. Michael's collapse was his own making, but Abigail's redemption was a small victory, one I'd helped spark. The talisman's glow was gone, but its strength lived in me, urging me to keep soaring, to rewrite not just my destiny, but the skies themselves. The Atlanta spring sun warmed the tarmac at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, a fitting backdrop for my retirement after 30 years as a captain at Horizon Airways. The silver talisman, my mother's Air Force relic, rested in a drawer at home, its glow long faded, but its legacy etched in my heart. It had granted me a second chance, pulling me back from the despair of my past life, where Michael's betrayal with expired eye drops had blinded me, ending my career. Now, as one of America's few female captains, I'd rewritten my destiny, my uniform adorned with stars of achievement, each a testament to the skies I'd conquered. My career had been a battle against the odds. The industry's sexism had never entirely faded. Even as a captain, I'd faced skeptical glances from veteran pilots who questioned a woman's command. During a transatlantic flight, a co-pilot hesitated to follow my orders, muttering about experience. I countered with my record, thousands of flawless hours, and Daniel Thornton, my co-captain, backed me. He said, "Captain Carter's calls are final, shutting down the descent." Daniel's support had been constant, his fight against his father, James Thornton's shadow, mirroring my own. "We're cut from the same cloth," he'd told me, once grinning pilots who proved the doubters wrong. Michael's life had spiraled into ruin. After his suspension for striking Abigail, no airline would hire him. His marriage to her ended in a public scandal, her father's influence unable to salvage his reputation. Jobless, he sank into alcoholism, living off his parents' support in Decatur. They called me, pleading for a visit. "He's a ghost of himself," his father said, the retired captain's voice heavy with regret. I pushed him into aviation. It broke him. I declined. My heart closed to Michael's pleas. His betrayal, choosing Abigail's influence over me, had severed our bond. I wished him peace, but my life was in the skies. Abigail's path surprised me. After our talk in the crew lounge, she'd contacted my motorsport friend, diving back into racing with a hunger I hadn't expected. She competed in regional circuits, winning races, and shedding her father's expectations. Daniel shared updates, proud but cautious. "She's finding herself," he said, "thanks to you." I'd learned more about her past, how her parents had crushed her racing dreams, forcing her into a flight attendant role she despised. Her bitterness had fueled her sabotage, but my empathy, sparked by the talisman's wisdom, had given her a chance to soar in her own way. Triumphs marked my final years at Horizon. During a flight to Tokyo, a bird strike damaged an engine, a crisis that echoed my parents' crash. My hands trembled, but Daniel's steady voice, "We've got this." Emily calmed me. We stabilized the twin-engine jet, securing priority landing with air traffic control. The passengers' applause as we landed safely was a melody of victory. Media interviews followed my retirement, focusing on my record, not my gender. Captain Carter redefined aviation. One headline read a far cry from the whispers of my early days. On a sunny afternoon, I returned to my small Atlanta home, the F-16 model on my shelf, a nod to my unfulfilled Air Force dream. Daniel waited outside, holding a bouquet of lilies, his grin warm. "So, Captain, any room for family now?" he teased. I took the flowers, smiling. I said aviation's my first love, but maybe I've got time for more. I wasn't ready for marriage. My life belonged to the skies, but Daniel's quiet presence had been a constant smoothing the turbulence of my journey. He'd shared his own dreams once over a long flight to fly, until he couldn't then teach new pilots to defy the odds. Reflecting on my journey, I saw the talisman's true gift, not just a second chance, but the strength to forge my own path. Michael's collapse was his own, and Abigail's redemption was a ripple of my resolve. The skies had tested me, sexism, betrayal, fear, but I'd risen above a captain in command of her destiny. As I looked at the lilies, their petals bright against the Atlanta sun, I felt a new horizon beckoning, where I could fly free, perhaps with Daniel by my side, but always on my terms.